This happened to me over 10 years ago, but I still think about how close I came to dying. I was already with my future husband when I met his cousin. We had a lot in common. We'd both struggled with addiction and anorexia. We'd talk on the phone and meet up to eat and see a movie, but he kissed me in his car, so I decided it was best if we stopped talking. I told my future husband about the kiss and he was understanding. I didn't tell him that his cousin got extremely upset over me turning him down. Some time had passed and we had started meeting up as friends. Since we were both starving ourselves, we always went to the same place, but after a couple of times, I felt like it wasn't healthy for either of us to meet up. He asked me to meet up one last time, and I stupidly said yes. We went to our place, and during dinner he was talking about his apartment and job, how happy he could make me. I got uncomfortable and I had asked him to drive me home. It was really late, and instead of driving me home, he drove me to the forest preserve. It was pitch black because all the lights were off. I immediately felt uneasy. We were alone in the parking lot, and I had a horrible feeling at this point that something was going to happen. He parked and turned off his car, then looked at me and said we were meant for each other. I didn't want to upset him, so I just said that he knew I was engaged and that we were just friends. He also had a history of violence, so I was terrified. He started getting really upset and almost crying. He said that he loved me. Then he put his arm around my neck and held his arm down really hard on the right side of my neck. His arm was around my neck and I'd been looking straight ahead when suddenly I woke up to a police officer at his window. He was asking if I was okay. I was really scared and confused. I had some vomit on my shirt and I'd wet my pants. He'd pressed down on my carotid artery for long enough that it knocked me out. He was also a wrestler in high school. He was telling the officer that we were fine and that I was just drunk. He got a ticket, but I was too afraid to say anything, because if he was arrested, my now husband's family wouldn't have blamed me, but that's what I thought at the time. I said I was fine, but that's why I wanted to go home now. I thought if I said it in front of the officer, he would drive me home because he took our names and he wouldn't risk trying something else. So he drove me home and didn't say anything. I don't know if he was trying to kill me or just got so upset that he went overboard. Regardless, he did almost kill me and it really messed me up. A person doesn't vomit and wet themselves after a neck compression unless they almost died. I told my now husband, but not right away because I felt like it was partly my own fault for meeting up with them. I only saw him a couple of more times during the holidays, and then eventually he stopped coming, but he didn't dare speak to me after what he did. If that officer hadn't shown up, I don't know if I'd still be here.
My husband travels a lot for work, so I'm home by myself quite often in our house. This was a couple of years ago now, and he was away for several days. So one night I was in our bedroom FaceTiming him as he was in his hotel. We often FaceTime every night when we're away from each other. We talked for a while, and it was getting late, so we said goodnight to each other and then hung up. My husband said that he was going to sleep now, and I was already in bed but not that tired yet, so I put on a show and laid in bed watching it. Roughly 30 minutes later, I heard something from downstairs. It kind of sounded like someone had knocked on the door. I didn't hear it very clearly though. I was upstairs, so it was pretty far away. I listened closer, wondering if I was just imagining it or if it was possibly something else. About 30 seconds later, I heard it again. It did sound like someone was knocking at the front door. Still, I didn't hear it very clearly. I got up from my bed and looked out of our bedroom window at first, but it did not have a view of the front door and I saw nothing. So I went out of the room to another window upstairs which would have a view of the front door area. When I got there, I looked out the window and I saw a man wearing a hooded jacket walking through our front yard, but he was moving away from the front door area and moving towards the garage. He soon went out of my sight. I didn't know who this guy was or what he was doing, but it seemed very suspicious. Why would he come to the door so late at night? And he didn't look like any of our neighbors, although I couldn't see his face. I just hoped that he would leave our property. So I went over and went downstairs, and then looked through several windows, including the front door window. Everywhere I looked, though, I didn't see the man at all. I thought that there was a good chance he had left, and that's what I was hoping. Still, I made sure that every door was locked and every window was covered. I was still feeling creeped out though, so I tried to call my husband, but he didn't answer because he was asleep. I turned on a light to the front door outside to try to make myself feel better. Maybe if the guy came back, he would see that a light was on and leave. My fear was that he would try to break in. So I went back upstairs at that point and got back in bed. This time, I did not hear any more noises, and I soon was able to relax and eventually fall asleep. However, I was awoken in the night. The first thing I remember after waking up was hearing the sound of one of the neighbor's dogs barking. I think that's what woke me up. And usually we didn't have any problems with the neighbor's dogs at all. Sometimes they might bark a little here and there during the day, but I had never woken up in the night to them that I can recall before. I didn't know whose dog exactly it was, because several of our neighbors have them. The dog was barking repeatedly and pretty loud. I was quickly wide awake. Out of curiosity and a little bit out of suspicion from earlier, I went downstairs. When I got there, I looked out of several windows, but everything seemed fine. I saw nothing. And shortly after I got down there, the dog stopped barking. So at that point, I went back upstairs and once more fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up, and things seemed fine. It was now bright and sunny outside, and I walked outside. However, when I got to the back patio area, I saw something that left me speechless. By the back door, there were a bunch of marks on the wall right next to it, and some on the door as well. It looked as though someone had been trying to pry the door open. The marks had certainly not been there before. I was shocked, and I took pictures and sent them to my husband. He told me to call the police. I realized that it was possibly from the man I had seen the previous night. I then also realized that the dog barking was probably from the man in our backyard. A neighbor's dog must have seen him and started barking, and that's probably what scared the man off. Had that not happened, he may have broken into our house. The police came out and I told them everything. My husband told me that I should stay at my parents' house until he got back, and I did that because I was too creeped out to stay in our house by myself. The man did not return though. When my husband returned, we ended up getting a camera set up, but nothing suspicious has happened like that since then. I'm grateful to the neighbor's dog for possibly saving me or saving our house from being robbed.
My name is Kylie, and I'm a 22-year-old female in Northern California. I research and create true crime videos. And while researching, one day I had stumbled upon a very scary human trafficking and or robbery scheme where people would scout you out in a store like Walmart and be in communication with someone on the outside who has a car waiting. I've been trying to find the videos about that since then, but I can't. Anyways, to set the scene, this took place around a month ago, February of 2025. I don't like to go to Walmart, but my grandma does. I've been taking her for the past 3 years since she can no longer drive due to her vision, but now she has cancer, and because of that, she appears weaker than she did even a few months ago. I've offered to go to Walmart for her to get her groceries myself, but she genuinely loves outing and is very specific about her produce. I picked her up with my 3-year-old daughter in the back seat, and I drove us to Walmart at around 3 in the afternoon. Everything seemed normal at first, and she was looking at the bananas for a while. She told me that I could go and get milk and a book that I've been dying to read before coming back to meet her at the bananas or in the bread section. I took my daughter and got those items within 4 to 5 minutes. My grandma doesn't have a cell phone, so it always has made me anxious to leave her alone in a store even for a moment. When I got to the banana display and didn't see her, I panicked momentarily before then remembering that she said she was heading to get bread next. However, when I got to the aisle, my heart dropped. No grandma. There are about 14 aisles between the produce where the bananas were and the milk where I had just been. I walked quickly around those 14 aisles 3 times and looked down every single aisle. No grandma. I finally found an employee and showed them a picture of her. He said that he hadn't seen her but would walk the 14 aisles. He started on the perimeter that had the meat and dairy while I had started along the perimeter that bordered the baby section and toilet paper. Both of us looked down every aisle, and there was no sight of my grandma. That was it. I started going to the front of the store to ask a clerk to please say my grandma's name over the loudspeaker. Yet, as I approached the front, I saw my grandma sitting on a bench in front of the checker, and she had already paid for her groceries. I asked her where she had gone, and she told me that she had gone to look for bread, but that two women had started following her in the store. She initially thought that she was just being slow and that she was in their way. So she then confronted them and asked if they needed something, to which they shook their heads. They didn't take anything from the bread aisle. My grandma still wasn't immediately concerned, but decided to go to an entirely different section of the store which had the soaps. They were right behind her, and she had heard them whispering into a walkie-talkie. After that, my grandma decided it was best to check out and just wait for me at the front. I was of course alarmed by this, so I got my milk and book and took it to the cashier that was right in front of the bench where my grandma was sitting. Yeah, and as I was checking out, I had noticed an odd man who was standing between my grandma and I. I didn't think he was odd at first, but then I noticed that he didn't have any groceries or items. He also wasn't clearly waiting for someone, and I'm assuming that he wasn't waiting for the Claire store that was next to the benches. That really wouldn't make any sense. He was wearing a dark blue baseball cap, and he kept darting his eyes between me and my grandma. If you think I'm just being judgmental, I promise I'm not. The thing that set my alarm bells off was the fact that he was holding his phone upside down and he was talking into it like a walkie-talkie in a very hushed tone. He was looking at us. He wasn't doing the normal thing that people do whenever they're on the phone and accidentally space off while staring at you. No, this was deliberate. I grabbed my bag and gripped the card tighter. My 3-year-old was understandably oblivious to my panic, and so was my grandma. I told my grandma that it was time to go, and she got up off the bench to follow me. However, as she got up and started following me, the man had started following us too. My grandma didn't notice him, but she's hard of hearing, and I couldn't tell her privately that I thought he was following us. She's also the type to go into a state of panic and anxiety, and in her current physical state, I didn't want that for her. Thankfully, and I mean thankfully, there was a guy who was standing by the double doors checking the receipts. I whispered to him in a hushed tone about the man in the blue cap who was following us, and what my grandma had experienced with the two women. He looked at the guy and then looked at me, and then called the security guard over. She was a very intimidating woman. I say this in the best way possible, and she escorted us out the door. The man in the blue cap had stopped following us, but he raised his phone again to say something else. When I finally got my grandma and daughter in the car and locked the doors, I then told my grandma what had happened with the man in the blue cap. Please be aware of your surroundings, and if you're a woman especially, bring pepper spray and do not be afraid to ask for help. If I just had my grandma with me, I would have been a lot calmer since I can handle my own. But I'm not capable of protecting my grandma and daughter at the same time. I'm still not sure what the exact intention of those people was, but I surely do not want to know.
This is something that happened back when I was in college. During my freshman year, I lived alone in a dorm room, which was in an all-girls building. It was a pretty standard place, where I just had my bed, a desk, a dresser in the room, and then a few things that I had brought. I also had a small couch and a mini fridge. But there was no bathroom in my room, so there was a community bathroom down the hallway that everybody would share. It wasn't too bad though, because the bathroom had about 8 small individual rooms in it. So one night I stayed up really late doing homework. I was probably up until around midnight working on assignments and studying. This is not something that I did every single night, but sometimes you have to. So after finally getting done with homework, I went to use the bathroom before going to bed. I left my dorm room, took a right down the hallway, and then made a left to the bathroom, which were a ways down. I never bothered to lock my door when I would use the bathroom, because I would just be gone for a few minutes. Plus, nobody was out in the hallways or anything. There really wasn't a need to. There were locks from the outside to the building anyways. When I went to the bathroom, nobody else was in there, and things were completely silent. I was in there for a few minutes brushing my teeth, and then when I came back to my room, I went inside. All my lights were off except for a lamp in the corner at my desk, and the TV was playing at a low volume. I went to the desk, turned off the lamp, and then got into my bed. So I remember that I was facing the wall, and I closed my eyes, and within probably a minute started to drift off to sleep. However, suddenly I heard the sound of my door opening. When I heard it, I shot up in bed and then turned over to the door to see what was happening. I just barely saw what appeared to be a man leaving my dorm room. I didn't see his face at all, just part of the back of him. He shut the door behind him and was gone. I was so confused, but I knew that a man was not supposed to be in here at all. I got up and quickly went over to the door and locked it. Then I decided to call campus safety and report it. An officer came to the building and looked around, but found no one. So whoever had been there was now gone. I was still very confused. After that, nothing else crazy like that happened in my time in college, but I still don't know what exactly happened that night. I figured that the man entered my dorm room when I was in the bathroom. There's no way I wouldn't have seen or heard him if he was in my room prior to that. There's also some places that he could have hid temporarily, and with pretty much all the lights off, I might not have seen him. I still can't believe that he was in my room at all, though. I'm glad that he left, and for a short time I thought that maybe he just had the wrong room. But why would he hide like that? I really don't know what was happening there. At the end of the day, I'm just glad that he left and that nothing bad happened. This happened when I was 21 years old. Back then, I believed that I made a rookie mistake, but have since learned my lesson and have taken precautions so that this doesn't happen again. I'm an avid mountain biker and have ridden trails for a while. It's good exercise, and I mostly like to just listen to music and pedal. I would never do time trials or anything like that. I would just keep track of my miles. I decided to go on a day ride at this one spot. I had been to this mountain before, but it wasn't one of my usual trails, so I wasn't super familiar with it. I was familiar enough with it though to where I would be okay going down the trails I had done in the past. Upon getting there, I was getting my pack ready when I met this girl who was doing the same. We started talking and hit it off pretty well. At the time, she honestly seemed like someone I could be friends with. She introduced me to her boyfriend, who was also a mountain biker. Once again, there were no red flags and they were very friendly. They both seemed to be my age. They asked me if I wanted to take a ride with them down their favorite trail. I didn't see any harm in it, and I wanted to learn the area better for potential future rides. So the trail we did was one that I had never been on before. After biking down a portion of the mountain road, we stopped briefly to take a water break, and then I noticed that the girl had strategically left her backpack open. She had closed it, but then opened it back up a little bit. It seemed harmless then, but makes more sense now. Without any sort of warning, while I was taking a pee break in the trees, the two of them started laughing and took off. I was in a compromised position, so I had to hurry up and conclude my business to be able to catch them. By the time I made it back to my bike, they were both completely out of sight. Not to mention, both of my tires had been slashed, so I was stranded. I sat down for about 10 minutes and decided what I would do. I grabbed my bike and started walking down the trail. After about 15 minutes of walking, I came across a wire on the trail. It was tied onto two smaller trees. Had I been riding, that wire would have easily slit my throat. But the fact that they went through the trouble of slashing my tires made me question if they set up the wire for me or not. I hadn't seen them, so this wire may have not been them, or they could have potentially left it there to try to get another rider. I honestly don't know, and I don't think much about that part anymore. Regardless, I used my Swiss Army knife to remove the wire. I wasn't able to go any further down the trail, so I pushed my bike in the opposite direction that I came from, back up towards where I started. Close to 6 miles later, I made it back to my car. There was a bike rental shop nearby that I stopped at and asked them about the two. I gave them a description of them, but I wasn't able to identify them well enough. They offered to call the police, but after the day I had, I just wanted to go home. I do regret not having them called because over the years I had always wondered if they did this to anybody else. I've never been back to that trail. I'm still a mountain biker, but I quit going alone since then, and thankfully my husband is a fellow mountain biker. Something really weird happened at my apartment a few months ago. So, I live by myself. I have a 1-bedroom apartment and I've been living here for a few years. For the most part, it's a pretty nice building. There's several levels and I'm on the 2nd floor. I have many neighbors, but I don't really know any of them and I don't see them too often. One night, I was at home by myself, and there was a knock at my front door very late. It was probably close to midnight. So right away, I knew that something was off. I wasn't expecting anyone. This rose my suspicions, and I went to the door to see who was there. When I looked through the small peephole in the door to the other side, I saw something strange. There was a man standing there wearing a suit and sunglasses. For whatever reason, I do not know why, I decided to answer the door. Even though it was creepy and late at night, I guess I just felt brave, or like the guy wouldn't do anything bad. I opened the door, and the guy just stood there a couple of steps away looking at me. But when I opened it, I also noticed that there were 4 other guys all wearing suits and sunglasses. It was the weirdest thing. They were standing farther back, a slight ways down the hallway. I asked if I could help them, and I'm sure that I seemed very confused because I was. The man in front of me seemed to look at me, as did the others, but nobody said anything. I looked at everyone else, and they were all just staring at me. I asked them who they were and what they were doing. They all just stared at me, but said nothing. Then, at once just about, every single one of them began to walk towards me. It started with the guys that were farther away, and then the guy right in front of me started to approach as well. I did the logical thing, which was to slam the door very quickly and then lock it. When I did, they actually tried to open my door. I yelled that I was going to call the cops. They stopped trying to open the door, but this did not scare them off. Now all the men just stood in the hallway staring at my door. I watched through the peephole. They were all just looking at my door, standing next to each other. I was so creeped out. I didn't leave the door and just kept watching them. I was debating actually calling the cops. This went on for quite some time. Then, finally, after probably 2 or 3 minutes of like a standoff, they all just walked away. When they were gone, I looked down the hallway and confirmed it. After that, they did not come back. I'm still left wondering what that was all about. Was it just a group of guys trying to scare people to be funny or something? I'm really not sure, but it was the weirdest thing that's ever happened in my time living here. I'm hoping that I never see those guys again. I had a hunting lease in a stretch of mountains a few hours from anywhere you'd call a town. The access road was barely a road, just 2 tire tracks cutting through brush and rock. There was an old cabin on the property that I didn't use at all or stay in. I would just do day hunting trips or sleep in my truck if I did go multiple days. It wasn't even a cabin, more like a 1-room shack with a stove and a broken cot. Someone had used it years ago, maybe even decades ago. I went alone most weekends that fall. My trips would include no cell phone signal, no other hunters, no noise except wind, and whatever animals were out there. The only thing that was slightly off that I had ever noticed before my most recent trip was that the door to the shack would sometimes be wide open when I arrived. I would always close it if it was open, but the door didn't lock or have a latch, so I figured the wind or animals might force it open occasionally. The last time I went to this spot was late in the season. I hiked out before sunrise and set up along a narrow draw where I had seen tracks crossing a shallow creek. For a while, everything was normal. Birds calling, small animals moving through the brush, but at one point it must have gradually stopped. I didn't notice things quieting down, but now everything was quiet. I remember thinking that it felt like when the power goes out in a house, how everything suddenly feels wrong. I stayed longer than I should have. I kept expecting things to go back to normal, but they didn't. I started to feel like I was being watched. I climbed down and decided to head back early. It wasn't worth sitting up there any longer. The walk back uphill was slow going. I kept looking over my shoulder without really knowing why. About halfway up, I got that feeling again, stronger this time. I stopped and turned around. The light was fading slightly, but I noticed something standing in the trail below me. It wasn't human, and it looked as if it was a deer standing on its back legs, but it was also seemingly too tall to be a deer. I couldn't make any other details out other than that, but it seemed to be facing me, staring up the trail. I raised my rifle at first, ready to fire a shot, but decided against it. I kept going up the trail, nearly walking backwards, going as fast as I could without running. When I got back to the shack, the door was open again, and it had been closed when I had left hours prior. I got my gear in the truck and left as soon as possible. I never went back, and I let the lease run out.
For privacy reasons, I won't be giving my age or name, For a bit of context, this happened about 2 years ago, a few weeks after my little brother was born. Ever since we moved into this house, there's been this small room in the basement that's always locked. To show you how little anyone uses it, I don't even know what's in there, but I've always assumed it's just the utility stuff like meters or something. The room is really tiny, barely big enough to lie down in. Now let's get into it. My parents went away for a weekend together, leaving me, my older sister, and my baby brother, who was just a few weeks old at the time, at home. My parents trusted us to take care of ourselves since they've done this before. Anyway, that night my sister went out with friends and wasn't planning to come back until like 4 or 5 in the morning. I watched a good movie and, since it was already getting late, decided to put my little brother to bed in his room upstairs. I did that and came back down to watch another movie, but I ended up falling asleep. About 2 or 3 hours later, right around midnight, I woke up to these strange noises coming from upstairs. At first, I thought it was just the neighbors since they can be pretty loud and the walls are thin. But then I looked at the time and I realized that it was way too late for them to still be awake, let alone making that kind of noise. So I got closer to the stairs to investigate, and just as I was about to go up the first step, I heard the sound of something metal falling on the ground. Guess what? It was the key to the small room in the basement. I immediately grabbed my phone, and instead of calling the police, I texted my friends to tell them what was happening. One of my friends had the brilliant idea of calling the police for me. Suddenly, I had heard the bathroom door then slam shut. I knew it was that door because it makes a very specific creaking noise when it closes. I remembered my brother was sleeping upstairs, so I carefully went up to check if he was okay. Thankfully, he was fine. Still not fully grasping how much danger I was in, I went to the bathroom door. Since it opens inward, I decided to violently push it open, and I heard a man scream. I immediately shut the door and held it closed to keep him from getting out. He broke the window, and outside the bathroom there's this sort of balcony. Not a proper one, but you get the idea. It connects to the balconies of the neighboring houses, which are all really close together. He used that to escape. I grabbed my brother in arms, ran to the kitchen, and noticed that one of the knives was missing from the knife block. I picked up another knife and crouched in the corner of the living room, crying like never before. The police arrived and I opened the door for them. When they searched the house, they confirmed that the bathroom window was broken, and I had hit the guy so hard that there was actually blood on the floor. But the most shocking and traumatizing part was what they had found in the small basement room. There were blankets and cans of food. They concluded that he had been living there for several days. That's it. I hesitated a lot before posting this because it really affected me, and I'm sorry if the story isn't super clear. Some of the details are still jumbled in my head. Anyway, I hope you all found it interesting.
I used to work night shifts as a security guard at a small manufacturing plant outside of town. It wasn't too massive, with just a few warehouses, an office building, and a parking lot surrounded by a chain-link fence. Most shifts went the same boring routine of sitting in the office, drinking coffee, doing some rounds, and trying not to fall asleep. One night in late fall, I was about halfway through my shift. It must have been around 1:30 or 2 a.m. I had just finished a walk around the perimeter and came back inside, and everything was normal. I sat down at the desk and checked my phone. I remember scrolling for a bit, maybe 5 minutes, when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but I figured it could be something work-related. I answered, but it turned out to be the wrong number. I have no idea if this phone call had anything to do with what was going to happen next, but I figured I'd include it anyways. After a bit, I decided to do another round, so I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. I took a quick walk around the main warehouse, maybe 5 to 10 minutes at the most. Then I headed back to the office. When I opened the door, I stopped. The lights were off, which was weird since they were motion censored on 30-minute timers. The room was dark, except for the faint glow from a monitor. I went inside, and the light turned back on after sensing my movement. Everything looked normal at first. My coffee was still there. My jacket was on the chair. Nothing moved. When I looked at the clock on the wall, I was dumbfounded. It was 5:17 a.m. That didn't make any sense. I checked my phone thinking the clock had broken, but my phone had the same time. I also had numerous missed calls on my cell phone. A lot of them, all from my supervisor, were asking where I was, why I wasn't answering, and if I had left my post. The first message was around 2:10 a.m. The last one was just a few minutes before 5 a.m. I called my supervisor back. He answered right away, sounding angry. He said they'd been trying to reach me for hours. Apparently, an alarm had gone off in one of the storage buildings, and when they checked the cameras, they saw me walk out of the office around 2 a.m. and just not come back. I told him I had only been gone for a few minutes, and I was trying to process what in the world was going on. Later that day, I asked to see the footage from the security cameras. At 2:03 a.m., I got up from the desk and walked outside. That part matched what I remembered. But then, I walk out of view from the first camera in a bit of a blind spot, and I'm not seen anywhere on any of the cameras for the next 3 hours. At 5:11 a.m., suddenly I appeared back in view of a camera, and it showed me doing my quick 5-minute rounds check in a warehouse. Then I walked back inside the office, and that's when I saw the time and all my missed phone calls. I don't remember any of those missing 3 hours of time or what happened at all. The only thing I can remember is my regular 5-minute walk around the facility. One time back in the 1990s when I was in high school, I was left home alone. Me being home by myself was something that very rarely happened because I have a large family. Living in the house was my parents, my older brother and sister, me, and then my 2 younger sisters as well. So with all those people, the chances were that somebody would be home pretty much all the time. Now, I don't remember where everyone had to go on this particular night, but it just so happened that everyone had places to go except for me. So for a few hours that night, I would have the house to myself. I was not nervous at all because I wasn't a little kid, I was in high school, but it still felt really odd, just because I was not used to it. I remembered that the house felt very quiet. It was dark outside, and our neighborhood was pretty typical. A good amount of other houses on the street, but things were mostly pretty quiet. At one point, maybe an hour or two into being home by myself, I went downstairs from my room to go to the kitchen. This was on the main floor and towards the back of the house. There I was getting something to drink when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. Much of the lights in the house were off, so I could see out the back windows better. We had a door that led out to the back patio, and I saw someone outside approaching it. I could tell right away though that it was not my parents and none of my siblings. It looked like some random guy. He didn't seem to notice me because I was entering the kitchen from an angle that was not really in his line of vision. Plus, it was mostly dark in the house. It was like right when I came around the corner to enter the kitchen, I saw him. I stopped and froze where I was. The man continued to approach the back door. I was now in the kitchen and near this door that led down to the basement. I then looked back over at the door where the man was headed and realized that it was unlocked. This gave me a terrible feeling of panic. In that split second, I did what was kind of a reaction to that, and I quickly opened up the basement door, which I was very close to. It was already slightly open, and I went inside and then shut the door behind me. Just when I did, I heard the back door to the house opening. I then quickly ran down the stairs. Our basement was finished, but there wasn't much down there. The stairs had carpet, which I'm glad for because it made my footsteps very quiet. I then went into kind of the main basement area where we had a couch and an old TV. We had some blankets on the floor next to the couch, and I literally hid under them. At first, when I got down there, I heard footsteps upstairs of the man walking. I could not tell where he was going though. I just hoped that he wouldn't go down into the basement where I was. I wanted to call my parents or the police, but could not. I didn't have a cell phone back then, and we did not have a home phone in the basement, only upstairs. I hid under the blankets for the longest time, and I didn't hear or see anything as I was covered. After I'm not even sure how long, I finally got up the courage to get up. I emerged and did not hear anything. The man had definitely not come down to the basement. After listening and not hearing anything at all for a while, I carefully made my way back up the stairs. When I got up to the top, I slowly and quietly opened the door to the kitchen from the basement. I looked around and saw nothing. There was a phone in the kitchen though, so I just needed to get it. After I got the phone, I then brought it back down to the basement. In that time, I still heard and saw nothing. I was hoping that the man had left. I called the police from the basement and told them that a man had entered our house, and I gave them the address. I didn't know if the guy was still there or not, but I knew that I should call to be safe. So I waited down in the basement until the cops got there, and I figured that the man was probably long gone by now. When the police arrived, I went upstairs and let them into the house. Then the police searched the entire place. To my surprise, they found the man hiding upstairs in my bedroom of all places. I was shocked. My parents got home not long after, as well as some of my siblings. I don't remember a whole lot after that, but it was certainly a crazy experience. I do not know exactly why the man chose our house, or if there was a reason he went to my room. The back door had been left unlocked with so many of us living there and coming and going, but after that, everyone always made sure to lock it.
I'm a 19-year-old man who lives in a small town in Arizona. I work down in Phoenix at a mechanic shop where I do small auto repair jobs. I travel 60 miles to work every day on this one deserted highway to get there and back. I also do have a little bit of a bad habit with smoking cigars from my late grandpa, who I always really looked up to. And we used to smoke cigars together, and it led to my addiction to smoking a cigar after work. I live with my girlfriend and her parents, who are huge anti-smokers. I usually leave my job and go grab a cigar from this humidifier near my job. I usually light up and smoke behind the nearby Home Depot every day before I make the long drive home. I haven't ever been bothered by anyone up until about a week ago. I was just minding my own business, smoking a cigar behind the Home Depot and scrolling through TikTok. I looked up for half a second, and I had noticed this ratty old gold Nissan Versa parked across from me near the loading dock. I didn't pay attention at first to it, but then 20 minutes later, I noticed the same car, but this time there's two people sitting in the car just staring at me. I didn't know if they were just waiting for someone or if they were on their break, so I just paid no mind to it. Then about another 20 minutes go by. I go to put my cigar out, and I still see them there. At this point, I jump in my car, start the engine, and start to pull out of the parking lot. As soon as I go to turn on the main road to get to the I-10 to head home, I see the Versa in my rear view. Again, I pay no mind to it and then merge onto the main road and keep going on my way home. I eventually get on the highway and start heading towards home, but then I go to look in my rearview mirror and I see the same f***ing car still behind me. I decided to maybe let's see if they're actually following me, and I get in the next lane over and start accelerating, thinking I'm going to lose them. For reference, I drive a 2002 Cadillac DeVille DTS with a very powerful V8 engine, while they have a gutless little economy car. I started accelerating and passing almost everyone, getting in the HOV lane going triple digits until I passed the city limits of Phoenix, and I then started slowing back down. I thought that I had lost them and just started driving normally again. But then I saw the Versa 4 cars back gaining fast on me. So I started accelerating yet again, trying to put distance on us. I thought it worked and that was my final encounter with them. I get off my exit sometime later, and then I stopped at a Maverick gas station to top off my gas after all that hard driving. I then go inside to grab a couple of energy drinks and to go to the bathroom. As soon as I come back outside, that same Versa was in the parking lot. I knew it was the same car, but there was no one in it this time. I then decided that I'm going to take a picture of the plates to report it to the police later on. I go to the rear of the car to find no license plate, and just when I was about to walk to my car, I then see 2 tall, skinny white guys with meth sores all over their faces, and they start running towards me. I jumped in my car, locked the doors, and tried starting my car so fast so I can get the f*** out of there. One of the guys runs over and actually starts banging on my passenger window and starts yelling at me. I didn't care what he had to say, so I just started pulling out of there like hell, and I didn't see the other guy get in their little Versa and attempt to box me in. I quickly go around him and almost lose control of the big boat of a car that I had due to the torque steer, but thank God I didn't. I started speeding through the desolate streets and quickly see a little side road. I then merge in there and start making random turns and head out in a random driveway with high shrubbery. I turn off my car and wait 10 minutes just to determine if I should go to the police or not. I started heading home, starting to question why they went after me. Did I provoke them in some way? There's no way they were security because that parking lot had no security. I still don't understand why they were so desperate to follow me 50 miles to a gas station in a desolate town. If they tried to rob me, I don't think they'd get much from a broke 19-year-old. I haven't told anyone this story but my girlfriend, and she told me to be careful and to stay away from that parking lot. I haven't returned to that parking lot ever since that day, and I now choose to smoke somewhere else. Surprisingly, this is one of those stories I forgot all about until a few days ago, when I was talking to a school friend on a call and got reminded of this. She was pretty freaked out when I told her, and so I did think about it again. This happened when I was roughly maybe 7 or 8 years old, so some of the details are fuzzy, but I remember it pretty vividly. My family had just moved to America, and were renting the top portion of your regular suburban house in a pretty safe cul-de-sac. I had friends. They were triplets, about 3 or 4 houses down. Not far at all. Every day I'd hang out with them, and around 9 or 10 in the night, my older brother would make the 2-minute walk and come get me and then walk me home since I was pretty young. I want to say that he was around 11 or 12. One night he came to get me as usual. The sun wasn't fully down, but it was getting pretty dark. We started down the walk as normal, when he had started casting glances over his shoulder. I didn't really notice until he shoved me hard away from the sidewalk and between 2 houses. Each house had a huge fence that separated their backyard, and he made me crouch behind the fence. I remember being really scared, but more so confused since I had no damn idea what the hell was going on. More specifically, he was a pretty big prankster, so I didn't really believe him when he then turned and said, "Walk behind the houses. I think someone's following us, bro." Looking back, he was probably trying to keep me calm. However, whatever calm was left in my tiny 8-year-old body was gone the moment I turned around and looked. This man had followed us behind the houses, and he was just by the edge of a few houses down near a very different fence line. He had a black hoodie on, black sweatpants, and white sneakers, and he had the hood up. I have pretty bad eyesight now due to some health problems, but back then it was crystal clear, and I could see with horrifying clarity that his jaw was hung open, like he was just standing there with his jaw hung open. It was horrifying. I think now that I'm older, maybe he just had some kind of medical condition that affected his jaw, or maybe he did crack. I don't know. But back then, I could have sworn on God I was seeing some kind of demon. Anyway, my brother, when he saw me looking and getting ready to freak out, told me to just run as fast as I can to our house. We booked it. Neither one of us looked back, but we were scared out of our minds. Like I said, we only rented the top portion of the house, so the bottom part belonged to some other tenant. I don't even remember if she was home or not, but I remember tugging that thing open and locking it as fast as I could. And when I looked up, he was there in the yard a little way away from the door, just staring at us. My brother and I told my sister and mother immediately, but nothing ever came of it. Also, my father was away on a work trip at this time. The day after, we went to go meet my dad at his warehouse, which had a small live-in portion above it where we lazed around until he was ready to come home with us. Around dusk, he came up and told us that we might have to wait since the police were here. He walked us around to the back window of the small area to show us the police all around the backyard area of the warehouses to a white van parked on the grass by the edge of the woods. Like I said, I was pretty young, so I don't remember many details of what actually happened. But I do remember my dad telling us that they had found a man and woman in the van. The man, he said, had his mouth hung wide open. He seemed really disturbed telling me about the whole thing and wouldn't answer any more questions about the woman. Maybe she was dead. I've got zero ideas. I do know, though, that they were arrested on trespassing charges. I don't know anything else, and I haven't asked about it, and I doubt he'd remember. It's been over a decade and he's pushing 70, but it freaks me out to this day. I still can't believe it happened, and I don't have any answers for it. I talked to my brother briefly about it in hopes that he remembered more than I did, but all I really got was a long tirade about whatever medical condition that the guy probably had for his mouth to be like that. He's an annoying medical student now. Sometimes I think maybe he didn't mean any harm and was just drugged out of his mind, but this was like the world's safest neighborhood, and it doesn't explain why or how he showed up at my dad's workplace. I asked around a little for more information. I wasn't able to find a lot, but I did find out why my father moved away from that warehouse. The police found a dead body in a car near us. I'm not sure if this is the same van or not, or when that happened, but take that as you will.
A couple years ago, I went to a concert in a city about 2 hours from where I live. I went with a friend, just the two of us, and we didn't drive back that same night because we were planning on drinking at the concert. We didn't know the area at all, but we figured it wouldn't matter since we could just use our phones to get around. The show ended late, close to midnight. By the time we got outside and away from the crowd, it was already pretty empty. We were both tired and just wanted to get back and sleep. I pulled up directions to the place where we were staying. I didn't realize until later that I had set it to public transit instead of walking, so it kept sending us down weird streets trying to connect routes that weren't even running anymore. We were both pretty drunk, and instead of switching the map to walking mode like I should have as soon as I noticed, we just kept walking thinking it would get us there soon. After maybe 15 minutes, things started to look wrong. There were no stores, no people, barely any cars, as there were now long blocks and streetlights for the most part. I stopped rechecking the route, and that's when I noticed someone standing across the street. I hadn't seen him walk up, and he must have been there already next to a bus stop sign, looking for directions. He made his way over to us, even though we were walking away from him. He caught up pretty quickly and walked a little ahead of us, then slowed down. He asked us if we were trying to find the station. I said no, we were heading somewhere else. He nodded like he understood, and then said, "You're going the long way." I said that was fine and that we had directions. We kept walking, and he was alongside us, not close enough to where we felt too threatened, as there was a good 40 feet between us. He spoke up again and said that our phone was wrong and the route we were taking would just loop us back here. I checked the map again, and I guess because I was tired or stressed, I couldn't really tell if it was right or not. It did look confusing though. My friend asked if he knew a better way. He said yeah, then pointed us down a side street saying that it was a shortcut and it would only take us 5 minutes. I didn't like the look of it as there were very few lights the way he pointed. I said we were fine and thanked him anyway. He didn't react for a second, and then he shrugged and said, "Suit yourselves." We started walking again, a little faster now to put distance between us and the man, who had gone back to just standing on the sidewalk. After a bit, I checked over my shoulder and he was gone. We kept going for another 10 minutes before I finally realized he was right about the route and we were going in a loop. At that point, I changed it to walking directions finally, and it rerouted instantly. The new path didn't go anywhere near where the man had pointed us to go as a shortcut. It actually took us in the opposite direction. We followed it, and within a few minutes we were back near a main road with traffic and open places. From there, it was easy to get back. The next morning, I checked the map again out of curiosity. I traced the shortcut he had pointed us to and found out that it didn't connect to anything. It just ended after a short distance, right behind a row of closed buildings. No exits and no path through. It was essentially a dead end. I don't know what would have happened if we'd listened and gone that way. Like I said, we were drunk and already not thinking straight with the map's route, so it's a good thing we did not end up taking the shortcut. I don't think that dead-end street would have ended well for us. This is something that happened really not that long ago. I live alone by myself in my apartment, which is on the first floor of a standard fairly new building. As I sat by myself in the living room one night, I got a text on my cell phone out of nowhere. The text read, "I'm watching you," in all capitals. It was from a number that I did not recognize, so I had no idea who it was. When I saw this, my first reaction, and also hope, was that it was a joke by one of my friends. But part of me also felt creeped out by it. I didn't know how they would have an unknown number if it was a friend, but I also did not know who would do something like this. But I mean, come on, it just had to be a prank. That's what I was telling myself. I texted back asking who it was that was texting me. Not too long after this, I got a response. They said, "The person that is watching you," once more in all caps. I guess I should have expected an answer like that. Now, I had all my windows closed and covered in my apartment, so I found it impossible for somebody to actually be watching me. But now I was feeling paranoid. My place is small, just one bedroom, a bathroom, and then a pretty large space with a kitchen and living room in it. Still, I went around and checked all my closets and rooms and confirmed that I was alone. Then I checked out my peephole and opened my door to the hallway. The coast was clear. Finally, I went around and looked out my windows to the surroundings. My windows looked out to the parking lot, which had a good amount of cars in it, but I didn't see anybody out there at all. So it was hard to tell if anyone was watching me or not, but it sure didn't seem like it. I saw nothing obvious, but if somehow this person was in the parking lot or something like that, they couldn't see me. All they would see is my windows, because I had shades over them. I felt safe in my place, but I was still really creeped out by this. I almost texted back again, but then I decided to just block the number. If this was a prank by one of my friends, I didn't find it funny, and by blocking them, it would probably get whoever was doing it to fess up. However, I did not receive any texts at all. For the rest of the night when I was up, nothing strange happened. I felt a little spooked and checked out the windows every so often, but everything seemed fine. So that night, I was about to go to sleep. I was in my bed just doing some reading before falling asleep. Out of nowhere, I heard this knocking at my front door. It was not that loud, but it was constant. A repeated knocking sound that just kept going. I was too creeped out to get up and see who was there. I knew that my doors were locked, so I just hoped that the person would not try to break in or anything. I also instantly connected it to the texts, and this whole situation now seemed 10 times scarier. I got out my phone, ready to call the cops. The knocking went on for probably about a minute straight. Then it stopped. I was still too freaked out to move for a while. Finally, I got up and left my bedroom. I went to the peephole of my apartment and looked, but the person was gone. I stayed up for hours after that, too scared to sleep. I didn't get any more texts, and I didn't get any more knocks on the door either. I was finally able to fall asleep really late. The next day, things were fine. Since then, I haven't received any texts or strange knocks on the door. I still don't know who it was. I thought maybe it could have been a neighbor, but I obviously have no proof of that. I really have no clue. To come to my actual door and knock on it so late at night seems too far-fetched to be a prank. And if it was one of my friends, I would think that they would have said something about it by now. I still don't know who did that or why. One night back in high school, I was out with friends, a completely normal night. The friend who was driving us drove all the time, and he knew his way around town perfectly, and so did the rest of us. Collectively, we had moved to different areas of town or changed schools throughout our lives, and we went to places almost every day at some point. That night, at almost midnight, we cruised around the basic neighborhoods, burning time until we had to be home. Suddenly, we got lost. Not just a turn onto the wrong street into a path, or cut into some random alleyway, but actually lost. We found ourselves on this suburban street that we had no idea existed before this. We recognized none of the houses or street signs or anything, which already didn't even make sense because we knew how to get anywhere and what the entire town looked like. We got to the end of the block thinking maybe we would recognize something, turn the corner, and be on our way. But from then on, it was this completely random neighborhood. The street we stuck to was kind of on a slope, so we were just driving down this little slope. There were no streetlights, and there was a very dim lamp on one of the curbs, and a few houses had decorative porch lights, but they were of no help. We could only see the sidewalk and the front of the houses when we were cruising right past them. The sky was pitch dark, and only the North Star and a couple stars in the distance. The blocks around this street didn't look familiar at all. The streets, including street names, were completely random, either streets we'd never heard of or streets with extremely generic names. The area didn't even fit the vibe of the town. It was almost like it was the design of a non-specific neighboring town with the same air as our town. We joked about being lost, but really we were laughing from being genuinely scared and screwed not knowing how to get home. This was well before cell phones were a thing, so we couldn't just Google Maps our way out of the scenario. You could have told us that we left town by accident, and I would believe it, even though it's extremely obvious when you leave my town, because it requires taking the highway on a very specific long road leading to towns that surround us. It would include going on one of the bridges that has multiple signs. Eventually, we somehow just ended up back in a location that we recognized, but it took probably about 45 minutes to an hour of being lost. Multiple times right after this happened, two of my friends and I, and even sometimes alone, we would go around town in the daytime and nighttime, taking various turns and streets, trying to uncover where we had gotten absolutely lost. I've tried again as an adult, but have never found it. I've never found any of the streets or the street lamps or even the same slope. Did we somehow leave town on a little path and we somehow didn't know, or was there something stranger going on? I'm an avid mountain walker and spend most weekends trekking in the mountains and hills of where I live in Europe. It was a hot Saturday afternoon about 4 summers ago now. I was doing one of my favorite walks, which was about 12 miles long. This area was mainly forestry, but the tracks themselves were gravel. There were no other walkers and only a few cyclists, which was kind of typical with it being so hot. So the first 10 miles were standard. I was at the bottom of a track that would eventually lead to the top of the valley. About 100 meters ahead, I could see a man walking in the same direction. He was tall, thin, and had short hair. He had some sort of limp, but I didn't think much of it, and he was actually walking quite fast, so I probably wouldn't have to overtake him. I carried on up the track. The sun was overhead and it was hot, but the man in front of me kept limping along and was making quick work of the incline. The track started to bend, and I lost sight of the limping man. The track comes up to a choice of 2 paths, one which leads to a small, often empty parking lot, and the other leads to the top of a valley. As I was about to head to the top of the valley, I heard a loud shout. It was coming from within the forest. I waited a second, and then heard another shout. This time the person was screaming, "No." My first thought was that guy must have tried taking a shortcut and had fallen over. As I made my way through the thick trees and ferns to see what was up, I stopped dead in my tracks. Up ahead through the trees, I could see the man who was limping ahead earlier. He was sitting down on a log with his head in his hands, and then screamed at the top of his lungs again. He then bolted up and started punching a tree. His face was bright red. He was raging. He then picked up a stick and started to bash it against a tree. I was frozen. I couldn't process what was going on. He just looked really mad. He shouted, "I hate you," and started stomping his feet. I quietly started to make my way back to the track, careful not to fall over or make any loud noises. That man was clearly a lunatic. I thought I would go on the more rarely used tracks towards the parking lot, and then take a shortcut north through the woods, as I figured that was the best way to avoid him. With every step, I became more confident and almost started to laugh about it. Maybe he wanted to let off a bit of steam or vent some anger. After all, the middle of the forest seems like a perfect place to do that, I suppose. As I looked back behind me, I could see the limping man about 25 meters away. He was wading through the brush, pushing branches and ferns aside, following after me. He had a strange snarl on his face, and his head was bobbing up and down between the brush. I couldn't believe what was happening. He must have seen me. There was no other explanation. I was only a mile away from a main road, so I started to speed up and walk a bit faster. I occasionally looked behind me and could see I was putting distance between us. I started to relax finally as I made it off the trail, and that was the last I saw of the man. I still don't know what to make of the situation, but the fact that he followed me through the brush was the most disturbing thing. I've done that same walk over a dozen times since, and I haven't seen him again.